I'm now very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for this inaugural session, and he is Mr. Forrest Whitaker, artist, humanist, and UNESCO Special Envoy for Peace and Reconciliation. He has been an inspiration to so many people. He has been an inspiration to so many people around the world, and I know you will enjoy and join me in welcoming him to our conference, and we look forward to hearing his speech. Mr. Whitaker, you have the floor. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency President Kutesa, Your Excellency President Chaudhry, Your Excellency Secretary General Chugong, Speakers of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. It is a tremendous honor to stand before this distinguished group of legislators and leaders and to be able to connect with all of you this morning. I know the importance of the work that awaits you in the next 3 days, and I'm humbled to have been included in this conference. So I want to thank the Inter-Parliamentary Union for the invitation, President Chaudhry and Secretary General Chugong for this gracious offering. As Speakers of Parliament, you are playing a critical role in democracies across the planet at a time when extraordinary action is required of the global community. I've devoted the last 10 years of my life to working with young women, young men around the world and developing their skills as peace leaders and community builders. These youths are our present and our future. And our laws reflect this, and they must. In my capacity as UNESCO Special Envoy for Peace and Reconciliation, I've had the opportunity to hear the voices and to listen to the stories of young women and men from all sorts of backgrounds, cultures, communities, and countries. And what they share is a deep and widespread discontentment with the political status quo. Around the world, youths are struggling to define their identities and discover their purposes. Many of them feel marginalized, like they don't have a place in society, or that their voices are not being heard. Some are angry, and they feel that violence and extremism are their only recourse. I see this in my own country, where too many times in the recent years, this anger has been channeled into shootings and even bombings. I see this anger in the Middle East, where ISIS is committing acts of terror and attempting to radicalize an entire generation. Of course, all violence and terrorism must be condemned in the strictest of terms and eliminated without exception, but these are a sign of a broader problem. They are a symptom of a society where people are giving up hope. You, the powerful lawmakers and leaders in your nations, you have the ability to change this. The word parliament comes from the French parler, to speak. You need to speak for all the people around the world who are not being heard, for former child soldiers in Uganda, South Sudan, Myanmar, for gang members in Mexico and the United States, for orphans in Syria and in all countries in the world. You have to help these people find their way so that they can stand strong in their identities. You have to demonstrate that everyone matters and that every person in your democracy has power and efficacy. You have to convince them to hope again. You know, when I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time on my grandfather's farm. And sometimes he would make me plow these fields. There was no horse. It was just me, my 2 hands, and a plow. And once this field was plowed, my grandfather, he would tell me where to plant the seeds. He'd say, here you plant the watermelons. Here you plant the turnips. Here you plant the tomatoes. And then I'd have to care for these seeds. If it was cold, I'd need to make sure that the ground was covered. I had to chase away the birds. I watered the soil. And if I did these things, then by the end of the season, I would have a field full of beautiful crops. But if I neglected the seeds, if I forgot to water them, or I didn't use the right fertilizer, or I planted them at the wrong depth, then the field would be covered with weeds, and I would have to get down on my hands and knees and choke out the weeds by the roots and start this whole process all over again. Inside every person, there exists a single precious seed. It carries a unique energy and identity. If we nourish those seeds, if we ensure that young people have enough to eat, that they receive proper educations, that their jobs are available in their communities where they can make an honest living so they can fulfill their basic human needs, if we can help them find purpose and make sure that their voices are heard, then the true identity of those seeds will blossom, and the beautiful flowers and crops will reveal themselves in fields and gardens all over the world. But if we fail to do this, if we neglect to care for these young women and men, then we will allow the weeds to take root. And these weeds are stubborn. They grow everywhere. The weeds of violence, of extremism, of intolerance, of racism. And these weeds can sprout through cracks even in the sidewalk. They can penetrate the walls of any seed and corrupt its very identity. There were some years on my grandfather's farm when the weeds would take over. They would grow too thick, and I would have to make a choice. I'd have to wait till the following season. But we can't wait. We can't give up on the current generation and simply try again on the next one. We have to nurture those young women and men now. We must all be farmers and gardeners. Every single man and woman can play a role in shaping a world where our children grow up knowing that they are cared for, they're cared about, and there is a place for them. So much easier to devote our days to caring and educating the next generation of leaders, rather than getting down on your hands and knees and spending what could be an eternity of pulling up weeds. And you, as speakers of parliament, as our more experienced leaders, you have to lead these efforts. You have some of the most beautiful jobs on the planet. Because with the laws you pass, you are shaping the very movement, the ebb and flow of our countries and our cultures. The smallest laws and policy-making decisions, even those that are made by local leaders, can make amazing, powerful impacts. Just think about it, a simple traffic sign that says you can't turn right, or a fence that you construct around a parking lot, can cause ripples that make a difference in people's lives. These things create boundaries and structure. Local leaders are in effect saying to people, yes, this place here, you can go there. This one here, you cannot. Single drop of water cannot sustain a plant, but many drops over time can be the difference between life and death. Now you're legislating on this large scale, at this national level. Every law you pass reflects and touches tens of thousands, maybe millions of people. Think about the power that gives you to care for and nurture the seeds of identity that exists within the youth in our world. Your laws cause ripples and waves that can nourish an entire generation. You have the ability to plow and to fertilize and to clip and to prune. You can make those seeds blossom in every field on the planet. I have witnessed the extraordinary transformations that occur when you nurture young men and women's potential and help them find their identity. My foundation works with a school in northern Uganda called Hope North. And this place is a sanctuary, a home for former child soldiers, refugees, orphans, whose worlds have been shattered by war, by violence. Hope North is a place where these children can seek refuge, somewhere where they can be made whole again. It's a place where the scorched earth of war allows life to spring anew. Now, there's one boy in particular we've worked with there whose story has stayed with me. When he arrived at Hope North, talking years ago, you could see this emptiness in his eyes. For so many years, this boy had been forced to be a soldier. And even though he spent sleepless nights haunted by the memories of what he had done, the very act of being a soldier had given him Purpose. Now he was safe, but he felt lost. The emptiness in his eyes revealed this lack of purpose. Without care and attention, this boy's life easily could have devolved into further violence and isolation. But in this community, where he was being supported and nurtured, the light started to come back into his eyes. I watched him one day singing with his fellow classmates, and I could see that as many voices came together as one, the harmony created these waves that were going over his body, washed him and moved him towards his purpose, and nourished his soul. And this newfound identity has transformed his life. Last year, he opened his own electrical shop. The last time we spoke, he expressed his plans to franchise 3 more shops in the surrounding villages. He's become a leader and a role model in his community. So with a little love and nurturing, a seed will fulfill its potential and express its true self. There are so many initiatives and sustainable goals that parliaments around the world should pursue to promote social welfare and to give youth the tools that allow them to find their identity. Parliaments must help ensure that every boy and girl receives a quality education. A human being has the same need for education that a plant might have for water. You cannot thrive if you're not allowed to learn. In the South Sudan, where many young people around the country have been taking up arms and fighting in the civil war, my foundation, jointly with UNESCO and partners, works with youth to educate and train them as conflict mediators and community builders. And we're already seeing how this is shaping these young men's, women's, lives. There's one young man in my program. His parents were killed when he was 7. He spent most of his youth in IDP camps. Now, he's finding his purpose, working to build his community. He's been able to transform his life further and further and further until now he's about to go off to university this year. 2 other young men from our program in the South Sudan, through this training and education, have heard this same call to service that you have, and now their identities as community leaders are continuing to blossom. They've been elected to parliament in Eastern Equatoria State. They will be engaged in the same type of work that all of you performed, shaping the ebb and flow of their cultures with the laws that they pass. Over the coming months, the parliament in South Sudan must ratify the peace agreement signed last week by the leaders in Juba. Legislators must work together to make this peace a reality, to create programs that support and reintegrate the 10,000 children who have been forced to serve as soldiers in this conflict. They must craft laws that stamp out harmful cultural practices and promote tolerance and reconciliation. Also, parliaments around the world must leverage the power of technology to allow people to express themselves and to bring people together. The internet gives voice to the voiceless. It allows every person on the planet to proclaim, here I am, I matter. I've seen the wonder on a young person's face when she accesses the internet for the first time and discovers a whole world of possibilities waiting for her. But as of 2014, only 32% of the individuals in developing countries have access to the internet. Increasing this technology's prevalence around the world will be a tremendous tool in allowing young women and young men to learn and to seek out communities and to find their identities and to express themselves all over the world. And the parliaments must empower women and other groups whose voices are not being heard, especially in fragile countries impacted by war and conflict. Too many women are the victims of sexual violence. There's a young woman that we've trained in Uganda. She's endured some of the most horrific things imaginable. She was captured by soldiers, forced to kill her sister. She was raped as a weapon of war. And then she had to learn to love the child, a daughter that was born of her turmoil, of this terrible ordeal. I'm sure you've heard many stories. But from this death and destruction has sprung new life. Because when she was offered fertile ground, when she was given a safe place to live, when she received an education and was trained as a peace builder, this woman found her identity. She started her own business. She's selling purses all over the globe. Now she's raising her daughter, born from the chaos and the fury of that war. And like mothers around the planet, she's nurturing a new generation of men and women to believe that they can shape the future. These are the people parliaments must serve. These are the seeds you must care for. No one should be left behind. You, assembled here today, come from over 150 nations. You represent the beautiful mix of nationalities, ethnicities, cultures, and peoples. I understand that the political states of your nations, the ways you govern, and the exact policies that you pursue are unique to each one of you. But just as every plant requires water, sunshine, and soil to grow, every person requires basic human rights that must be universally provided across all nations. Securing these rights and promoting development are instruments for survival of the world. So when the United Nations formally adopts 17 new Sustainable Development Goals in just a few days, at this very place, it will announce to the world the intention to ensure universal education, promote widespread internet access, achieve gender equality, eradicate poverty and hunger, reduce inequality, combat climate change, and more and more and more. These challenges illustrate the deep interdependence between the developed and the underdeveloped world. Because whatever impacts one impacts all. We can no longer believe that our neighbors' problems are not our own, that wars won't spread, that refugees won't cross borders, that poverty and extremism will stay where they are. Weeds can grow anywhere. And that means that implementing the Sustainable Development Goals will require collective action. Addressing these massive challenges will take all of us, every country, every person, working together. You must be the men and women who lead us in these efforts, who make sure that we are fulfilling our sacred obligations to each other and coming together to build peace and sustainable development that all citizens of the world can share in. You must make sure that we care for the seeds inside of those who will inherit this world. If you imagine traveling to the banks of a mighty river and you reach your hand into the water, you can hold in your hand just a single drop. The drop is distinct, the drop is perfect. But when you turn your hand over and that drop falls back into the current, where it joins with trillions of other drops, together they make a single entity, flowing as one towards one end. And along its journey, that river will create life everywhere it flows, from the highest deserts to the harshest seas. We humans are those drops. Together, we are a river, inseparable, a single entity, united. We must be united in purpose. Together, we can create the life that we want. Our voices and our messages can percolate to every corner of the world. Our good deeds can create waves that irrigate every field and provide the love and nourishment and support that every single young woman and man needs to become the truest and most beautiful versions of themselves. Together, it is possible. It is possible. I want to thank you again for this gracious opportunity to connect with you today. I want to thank you for working to ensure that every person's voice is heard. And I want to thank you for all that you're doing to support peace and to support development on this planet. Thank you. Thank you very much.